A report out of China today that a herdsman there has been infected with the quote, bubonic plague. Yes, that bubonic plague, the one that you read about in history books, that was referred to as the Black Death, the one that killed more people than any other pandemic in the entire history of the world. That herdsman, he was hurting his animals and apparently he was infected by a bacteria that they were carrying, or the fleas that surround them were. Now if you're thinking, that sounds like a remote case, an outlier, if you will, and then there's another Mongolia now, let's go there, which is right next door. Young 15-year-old girl has also been infected with the Black Plague. How she apparently came in contact with a marmot, kind of like a big rodent, that was hunted by her dog. And here's something else according to the CDC. It's going to surprise you. Every year in the United States, 7 people are infected with the Black Plague. Who knew, right? So why does this matter? You know why it matters, because it shows that plagues or pandemics are not, pardon the pun, here black and white. They don't just go away. They linger, they mutate, they evolve, and governments have to have a go-to plan to deal with this kind of thing. Why? Well, because as we've learned, in fact as we're still learning here in America right now, trying to come up with a plan once the pandemic is in full swing, as it is right now, man, that's a fool's errand to look back at the Black Flag and our changing coronavirus plague. The questions we think you'll be asking tomorrow: how is COVID-19 evolving, and what can we learn from the new Black Plague findings? COVID-19, which is really important because the virus is not what we thought it was just a couple of months ago, different. But I want to begin with the latest on these new cases that seem to be ripped right out of our history books. Starting us off with more on the Black Plague, a deadly disease that killed 50 million people in the 14th century, has once again reared its ugly head, this time in China and Mongolia. In China's Inner Mongolia region, a herdsman has been diagnosed with the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, and in Mongolia a 15-year-old was taken to hospital this past weekend with plague-like symptoms. This just 1 week after a 27-year-old and his 17-year-old brother were treated for the disease in May. A Xhosa couple visiting Mongolia died of the plague in its most common form, known as bubonic. The disease is spread to humans by fleas that bit an infected rodent, which causes swelling in the lymph node. The more deadly version is the pneumonic plague, which can be transmitted between humans through coughing. However, most of the cases at hand seem to have been caused by the consumption of raw marmot meat, the marmot being the heaviest member of the squirrel family. The Kazakhs died after eating raw marmot kidney. The 15-year-old ate a marmot that was hunted by a dog, and the 2 brothers were eating a marmot shortly before they sought medical help. As for the Chinese herdsman, he's known to have visited an area where the bubonic plague exists and contracted the disease. They're either way like the coronavirus, which is thought to have come from pangolins. The plague is classified as a zoonotic disease, meaning it jumps from animals to humans according to the UN. If humans do not change their habits, which include unsustainable agricultural practices and the consumption of wild animals, these type of diseases become more common. They are not unpredictably events like earthquakes or asteroid hills. Instead, they are predictable consequences of the ever-intensifying interactions among humans, animals and the natural world. Although it has been largely eradicated, the plague continues to show its face around the world. In the US alone, there's an average of 7 human infections a year, mostly in the West and Southwest. Although the latest outbreaks may be centered in Asia, it will take a worldwide effort to keep diseases like the Black Death under control. They seem to be suggesting, or we're learning now, that COVID-19 affects the vascular system more than the respiratory system. We used to think, oh yeah, this is a disease that goes into your lungs and it doesn't let you breathe. In actuality, what it seems to do is it creates blood clots all over your body, and that's what causes a lot of people to die. The reason I mention this is it doesn't seem like we've really nailed this thing down yet. We are learning more and more all the time. What's happening is we are understanding it's of cytokine storm. The immune system just freaks out and it starts creating blood clots, and the people that have the cardiovascular disease are most susceptible to lower oxygen levels, which feeds upon itself. And because the respiratory disease lowers your oxygen level, the people with cardiovascular disease suffer the quickest and the most. We're also learning that this disease, this virus, is at least the way it's being described in some of the literature I've read already kind of mutated, that there was the Wuhan strain, which was the one that was described as very lethal, and now they've come to call the second strain, I guess, the European strain or the Italian strain for lack of a better name, and they say that one is not as lethal but more transmissible. If it's not deadly, that virus is going to procreate and reproduce more rapidly now. Every time a virus reproduces, there's mutations out the kazootie. What happens with mutations are usually deadly, but once in a while a mutation lends itself to perpetuation of its race, the virus, and if it's more contagious and less deadly, there's going to be more covert virus. Unlike the cardiovascular that we were correct about from the beginning. All these scientists were preaching that there was seasonal variation in the summer. It would go away and come back in the fall. We're absolutely wrong about that. This virus is not really a function of the season. We're going to learn a lot of things. A vaccine's not going to come out too soon, but the biggest bioethical dilemma is getting our children ready and the schools in September, because we have a moral obligation to get these kids a future. Not lock them in the video room. Why is it that, again, according to the literature I've read, it doesn't affect children the way it affects adults? In fact, children, even if they have it, even if they're carriers for some reason, are not good transmitters of the disease. Normally, it's natural life that's productive aging. Unfortunately, a child has a hyperimmune system. Every once in a while a child dies because they're overreactive to the virus, but they're very strong. It's different. The flu got some of the younger kids. This thing does not transmit well to the children. And if you're not going to get very sick, you're not going to transmit much of it. Please take some time to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.